Some suggestions were that his behaviour would be sociopathic, and the reasoning behind the events of Malik, and as if folding with Gabriel, that the behaviour was bizarre and certainly not by a normal person.
At that point, we really needed to find Gabriel's body to show basically that it wasn't taken by a crocodile, and on finding the body that we would then find some sort of forensic evidence which would tie Calanca to the offence.
Police firmly believed Damon Calanca was involved in the disappearance of Gabe Meyer. And while they had a circumstantial case, they had no body. And then, on Australia Day, only 2 weeks after Gabe disappeared, that changed.
I received a phone call from Margaret Carmichael, and she informed me that she'd found a suspicious site on the farm, and she was concerned that it may have been something sinister, and it may have been Gabe Meyer.
The shallow grave was reported to police at midday yesterday by locals who noticed freshly turned soil in scrub near Moresby Creek outside Innisfail. Police immediately excluded media and the public from the scene while the remains were exhumed for forensic tests.
In 21 years, I've probably never had to experience anything so emotional and so draining, and I felt terrible sorrow for the family at that stage.
There are things that a parent knows somehow. I don't fully understand it myself, but there's certain things that you know. And that was one of them that they didn't have to tell us. We knew.
To actually have his body found was a relief. And yet it was just so horrific, you know, I remember saying to them, "Where did you find him? Did you find him in the river?" And he said no, he was in a grave.
Upon exhuming the soil, we located what appeared to be a human hand that was obviously tied behind the person. And as we removed all the soil from around the deceased, we found that both the hands and feet had been tied, that the deceased had been wrapped in a blanket and then further twine tied around the blanket.
Gabe's body was removed and taken to the morgue. Meanwhile, the witness who had found him near the creek on the cane farm she lived on was being interviewed.
She stated that on the night of the disappearance, she in fact did see a set of headlights driving from the highway through a back road to the area around where the gravesite was located. Also, the day before she contacted police, she did see Calanca coming from that area.
There was no doubt in her mind it was Damon Calanca.
Calanca's parents lived next door to her. It appears that Calanca had in fact been raised in this area, was very familiar with the area, and had in fact fished just a matter of metres from where the gravesite was.
The post-mortem results on Gabe showed he had not been murdered in any overt manner, like being stabbed or shot. So while detectives waited for toxicology reports, other immediate evidence was being followed up.
During the post-mortem, police obtained quite a number of exhibits, such as the twine that was used to bind the hands and feet, and also the blanket that was wrapped around the deceased.
Police have now released this blanket found during their investigations. They and the Meyer family are urging anyone with any information to come forward.
A couple of days later, Calanca's ex-wife did contact police and stated that the blanket she had seen on television was in fact the same as the blanket she had owned when she was married to Calanca.
And the rope that was used was similar to rope that had been in Calanca's flat and was now missing. It belonged to his flatmate.
In addition, strips from the blanket were sent for forensic analysis. As a result of this testing, 6 polypropylene fibres were found that did not come from the blanket itself. These fibres were then compared with fibres taken from a piece of the carpet that had been recovered from Calanca's unit. And they matched. Now their thoughts went back to the cause of death and whether Gabe could have been drugged.
When we were considering the scenario of Gabriel being poisoned, we do recall that early in the investigation, Calanca had stated that he supplied Gabriel a drink of sustagen.
That I promised him the stuff, just like a protein shake, and he'd have it with milk and it was very soft. And he said, I got it for you. I made some up for him. There was nothing wrong with it, I just made some up for him. But he had it today, and then at 5:30 he said, we're going, and I said, see you later.
He went to great pains to tell us that I just gave him a glass of sustagen. There was nothing wrong with it. I just took the seal off it. He just went on so much about this glass of sustagen that it had to be suspect.
When the toxicology report came in, the results were chilling. Gabe had been given a carefully calculated cocktail of drugs.
Well, the laboratory found paracetamol, pseudoephedrine, chlorpheniramine and metoclopramide in the liver and stomach contents. When that combination is present, one merely thinks of a cold and flu preparation.
The toxicology report showed very high levels of these drugs in the tissues, meaning there had been an overdose.
Depending on how much was used, how much was consumed and absorbed, it could kill him. More likely is to cause extreme drowsiness, perhaps falling asleep, and then he could easily have been asphyxiated, smothered in some way, or killed in another way that would not have had much resistance from him to respond to any act against him.
When Gabe was discovered at the gravesite, police located a small piece of plastic that was adhered to his face. A very unusual shape, almost like a small rectangle with a hole cut in the middle of the rectangle. It was identified as enforcing for a plastic bag, and that was part of a plastic bag that may have been placed over Gabriel's head.
The detectives now had enough circumstantial evidence to make an arrest. But Damon Calanca wasn't going to make it easy. He had another lie up his sleeve.
This entire case was going to be fought on intent. It was central to the case to be able to prove that this was a planned, calculated murder and not a murder that was committed in the heat of passion.
When Damon Calanca was arrested for the murder of Gabe Meyer, he refused to speak with police. But he did talk to his own sister.
Deborah Morton told the magistrate that Calanca had at first denied any involvement, that she'd then gone on the attack and was out to crack him. She said she'd told Calanca, "For once in your life, I want you to be a man and tell us the truth. The family needs to know that you've been nothing but a compulsive liar all your life."
Mrs. Morton then told the court that her brother started to tremble, then said, "I did it." That when she asked him why, Calanca replied that Gabe had been coming onto him in the gym, always touching him, that he'd got angry, lost control and strangled him.
I think at first we were enraged to think that he would try to say these things about Gabe, and then we thought, this is a desperate person.
But when police first spoke with Calanca, that defence was never mentioned.
I recall asking him if he believed or knew that Gabriel may not have been homosexual.
You know, he got to be homosexual. It's quite, you
Calanca was going to argue that he did not intentionally kill Gabe Meyer, and that accordingly he should only be convicted of manslaughter and should get a far shorter sentence. So this entire case was going to be fought on intent. It was central to the case to be able to prove that this was a planned, calculated murder and not a murder that was committed in the heat of passion.
The gravesite measuring exactly that of the grave found at Polly Creek was evidence of premeditation.
He was planning to take Gabe Meyer out to Polly Creek on some pretense because you had to walk in there, and he planned to kill him and then bury him there. But he was too anxious. He was too keen to kill Gabe Meyer.
The the concoction administered